Hi guys, so today's video is about my grade 7 year of school and then the special program I went to called the York Center. I was pulled out of the regular school system. So my grade 7 year was different in two ways from my previous years of elementary school. So one thing was I had an EA. EA stands for Educational Assistant. I don't know if the term exists in other countries, but I have heard it in other parts of Canada. An EA is an aide who works with children with special needs in school settings. So they gave me the EA because I had Asperger syndrome diagnosis. Uh, that was September, beginning of the school year. By October, they switched me to an EI. EI stands for Educational Intervener, and that may be unique to my board. I have not heard it anywhere else. And the difference is they have training to deal with students who might have violent behaviors, and I was switched because I kicked a teacher. I don't know why I kicked her, but I'm gonna get back to that kind of thing because I wasted that school year. So I'll discuss that in a second. The other way my grade 7 year was different was the school had us on what they called a rotary schedule. Supposedly it was to get you ready for high school when you have classes in all different parts of the school instead of one class all day. But it was not. It was dumb as far as I'm concerned because in high school you walk by yourself from one class to the next. This thing, we had three classes of grade 7. So all three classes would be lined up in the hallway, and the teachers would switch places, and you followed the teacher in your class. So I don't know how they thought that was anything like high school, but that's what they did. So I had a different teacher for science, and I had a different teacher for our rotating history gym thing. And the rest of the time I was in the regular classroom with a regular teacher. And I'm going to go back to that in 1 minute. I just want to mention something I forgot. In Canada, you're taught French in school because we're officially bilingual. The reality is most people outside of Quebec can't speak French. They don't teach it well. I couldn't speak French with a gun to my head. I think I've learned more Italian living with my stepdad than I ever learned French in school. But I want to bring this up because for some odd reason, I don't really have any memories of anything really bad with my French teachers. The French teacher comes in for one period of the day, and that's the prep period for the regular classroom teacher. I don't seem to have a lot of memories from French class. I think my grade 5 one intimidated me a little. Grade 4, I guess I wasn't bored, so I didn't act out with him. I don't remember anything before grade 4 in terms of French teachers. I remember one vaguely. I mean, like a dress she wore once. I have like no memory. I don't know why. It's like been blocked out of my brain. It's very weird. And even in grade 7, I like wasted that year. I actually remember the French teacher came in for his period, and the kids started doing presentations. They had to make an advertisement on an 8 by 11 piece of paper, and they had to make it in French. And for some reason, even though I really didn't care about school, because he was doing it alphabetically, and my last name first was R, I pulled a paper out of my desk and threw something together. So when he got to my name, I'd have a presentation. Don't know why I did that. I didn't care about anything else. I don't know. Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that because that's weird. How I don't seem to have a lot of memories of my French teachers. So I'll get back to my general grade 7 year. So after I was diagnosed with Asperger's, I took it as more of an excuse than a reason instead of, I have these problems because. It was, well, I can do whatever I want because. And by the time I started grade 7, I had, my marks were C's by the end of grade 6. I still believed at that point I wouldn't finish high school. So I did whatever I wanted. I acted out. I would interrupt the class. I mentioned picking the teacher for some reason. I remember after school one day refusing to. I don't remember why. What kid doesn't want to go home from school? But I remember standing in the classroom door, blocking the door, refusing to move, and I made the principal late for a meeting. And the school is not allowed to touch you, so they had to sit there till I moved. So that was what I did in grade 7. Um, that was, and my poor EI was basically running crowd control with me. There was no special classroom for her to bring me to. Sometimes she would bring me to the kindergarten and tell me I was volunteering, which I actually enjoyed, so I think it might have encouraged behavior. But she didn't have a choice. She had nothing else to do with me. She had to get me out of there so the teacher could teach and the other kids could learn. She was really between a rock and a hard place. Um, and just to touch on those, so that was basically my whole grade 7 year. I did what I wanted, and she ran interference. And I failed stuff, like I didn't do my schoolwork if I didn't feel like it. I ripped up a test in science class because I didn't feel like writing it. They did make me tape it back together and finish it, and surprisingly, I obeyed. But that was basically my grade 7 year. One thing the school did do better, anyway, was they started doing in-school suspensions, which makes more sense than sending a kid home. I understand, but for someone with autism, it still wasn't really a punishment because it would send me with my EI to a meeting room across from the office that was often empty. So instead of being in the noisy classroom, I got one-on-one attention in a nice quiet room. So I didn't necessarily love being in there because it was kind of boring. Acting in the class was definitely more fun, but it wasn't awful. I wouldn't call it a punishment, but at least I guess they tried. I don't know. Um, and about those, sorry, and about those other teachers, those other classes I had outside of my regular teacher. So science class was a disaster. That teacher, I walked all over her. I kind of everybody did, but I was definitely the worst. I mentioned ripping up the test. Sometimes I would take a nap in the back of the classroom. I can't remember if my EI was with me. I feel like she may not have been with me every single period. They might have had her with another kid because budget cuts. But I don't recall her being with me in science, to be honest, so I could be wrong. And then the history gym rotation was sort of the exact opposite. That teacher was terrifying to me. Very mean. No one ever thought she was mean. Even normal kids thought she was mean. But for me, she was terrifying. She was above that sort of line of, okay, now you're terrifying, I'm not going to cross you. But that doesn't work for me either. It sort of confirms for me that, because people have said that kids with autism did better in the past because the classroom was more structured. But to me, that proves that I would have done badly 50 years ago in school too, because kids were terrified of their teachers. And me being terrified of this teacher meant failing things in history. I was afraid to go for help. So I don't know why I even tried. I guess because I was afraid of what she would do if I didn't try. And then gym was as much of a disaster, because in previous years I would just sit out and refuse to do anything. Because it was hard, I couldn't keep up with the other kids. I remember in grade 5, because the gym was also sort of our auditorium. I remember I spent a lot of time climbing around on the stage and exploring in grade 5. So grade 7, no, because I was terrified of this teacher, I actually had to try and participate, and I hated every second of it. And again, I was too scared to cross this person. And again, I don't think my AI was with me that period either. I don't seem to remember her being there. But I think I wanted her with me because I thought she could help me with the teacher I was scared of. But fortunately, my regular classroom teacher was kind of the right level. Wasn't terrifying and wasn't a pushover. And, so I was, yeah. So I talked about how I was in the classroom already, though. I wasted a lot of time and I had to run interference, like I said. Um, so yeah, I'll move on to the York Center. So I was pulled out of, because I was failing everything, I was a complete mess. The school board recommended I was pulled out of the regular school, and I was sent to a day program. So basically, I went to school there, and the way it worked was there were three classes. It's different now. It's a lot bigger now. When I was there, like 15 years ago, there were three classrooms of 6 kids each, which is, that probably hasn't changed because the needs are still high. But each classroom had a teacher and a CYW. CYW being child and youth worker. They work with troubled youth basically. And you would do academics in the morning, very basic, like reading, writing, math, because a lot of the kids came in with a lot of issues, so they couldn't, they had to keep it simple. And then in the afternoon, some of it was therapeutic, like we would do art, and you'd have one-to-one therapy times with your CYW. And then there was also some fun stuff. Um, like sometimes Friday afternoons usually were the fun time. Sometimes you'd go out like around the corner to a bowling alley. Sometimes we stayed in and played board games. But you did have to earn it. You could lose. That was a privilege. You could lose with behavior. And that was, so yeah, I'll go from that. what I learned there that was different from my previous school, what my previous school did wrong, at the York Center, my actions had consequences. Like I just said, if didn't do what you're supposed to do, you could lose, your Friday privileges. I tried standing in the door there, and they just moved me out of the way because they're allowed to touch you there. So they just moved me out of the way and kept walking. If I refused to participate in gym class, there were consequences. Um, and it was geared to the individual student. I love reading, so basically, you can't read this book you want to read if you don't try and participate in gym class. There were actual consequences. And at the same time, they also would not give you a big, huge reaction when you were deliberately attention seeking. So I could roll around on the floor and throw shoes and do whatever I wanted. I remember knocking over desks and chairs once, and they just looked at me and asked me when I was finished. So things had consequences. Things didn't get big, huge reactions, and it was what I needed. Unfortunately, it took me a while to get that through my head because most compared to most of the kids there, my issues were relatively minor. A lot of them came from severely broken homes, abuse situations. Were living in foster care. A lot of them had law enforcement run-ins, and some of these kids were as young as 13, and they were already like criminals. And unfortunately, probably many are in jail. So in comparison, I was like an annoying little kid. But I wanted their attention. I wanted, you know, friends. So my goal that first year really, I had the program for 2 years. And the first year I was there, it was basically all about, look at me, pay attention to me, aren't I great? I didn't care about getting better. I didn't care about doing better in school. Some of the kids were able to do higher level work and actually earn high school credits there. I did not. I was screwing around too much. And yes, I basically wasted that first year because I kind of had this attitude of they're gonna somehow fix me and I can do whatever I want, and whatever I want is getting the other kids to try and get the other kids to like me. When I finally got the message was when they had my end of year review. Many kids, not all, but many, after the first year in the program, they started doing what they called integration. So you go to a local high school for 1 or 2 periods a day, and then you come back to the center, New York Center, in the afternoon for the more therapeutic stuff. And in my case, the school I would attend fully through high school was local, so I was able to go to my own school. Some kids came from pretty far and had to go to like a host school for those integrated classes. So when they were doing my end of year review, I just took it for granted that after the first year I'd be integrated. And when they looked at me and said, "We don't know what to do with you. You're clearly not trying," I think they might have exaggerated. I don't think I was really that awful compared to a lot of the children, but they made a big enough production that it got through to me. And when the second year started, I was actually trying. I was actually trying to use techniques, trying to diffuse situations instead of acting out and doing whatever I want. I would sit and do my work. I wouldn't worry about impressing the other kids. It really got through to me. When I saw some of these other kids integrating and I wasn't, it was a smack in the head I needed. And a few months into my second year, I think it was like mid to late October, they agreed to start integration. So I started going to my high school. I would go for initially that first semester, because high school is 2 semesters where I live. September to June, and then September to January, and then February to June. So this was October when I started integration, and they had me in one of the few special ed classes I've actually seen in this board. It was called, my school was quite new. My high school I went to, I think the year I started, it was like 2 years old to school. So they had some programs and stuff that previous schools didn't have. And that included a special ed class called Learning Strategies. And all the kids in there had some sort of learning disability or what have you. So they put me in that class. I think it was like 9 or 10 kids. Because they thought it would be an easy transition. I went very well. I completed the semester in that class. And then they wanted to try one more. Sometimes the kids get to leave the program, between semesters. With me, they decided they wanted to see me in a regular full-size class first semester before they were ready to discharge me. So my second semester, they put me in a history class, a regular history class. And my biggest anxiety around going to high school, for some reason, I was really anxious about the transition between classes. Could I get from one class to another in time? So I was begging them to have me in two classes. They didn't know if I was ready for that. So what they ended up doing, this is very cool. My high school you're going to learn about really bent over backwards for me. There's a grade 10 course in the Ontario curriculum called Civics and Careers. And it's two half credits over the semester, and then you get one credit for it. Um, the first half of the semester, you would do civics or careers, and then you switch halfway through. So they decided if I did well in my history class, then halfway through the semester, they would stick me in a careers class so I could practice the transition because I was so anxious about that. So even though I was a grade 9 and it was a grade 10 class, they were willing to do that for me, which is amazing. And it proved to me that, proved to me that transition was not as big a deal as I thought. And I completed that semester well, and they were more than happy to send me back to regular school. I was able to leave the York Center. And I'm going to leave it there. I've gone really long today. But you will see basically through high school how I kept trying, and sometimes things knocked me back. But basically, you've seen the 180 today, where I hit my lowest and then I started turning around. But if that's my lowest, then, I gotta say I'm pretty lucky in life. Okay, thanks, guys.